My name is Jacob Kilcrease, and today I'm presenting on your data and the current cookie monster. So, a little bit about me. I am a junior here at UNC Charlotte. I am majoring in computer science with a concentration in AI, minor in philosophy, so I get some of that ethical background when dealing with technology. And over the past while, I have been very concerned about the modern usage with data and privacy and how technology has become quite invasive with our just lives in general. So yeah, everyone's got their cookies, you know. Did you know what you were agreeing to when you took those cookies? You know, you ever read it? Could everyone please check their napkins? Should be something written on each napkin. So, this represents, you got a cookie and a napkin, you've just accepted all cookies, probably without realizing what you just accepted to. There's various things written on there. Name, I now have access to your full name and probably other various profile information about you from that website. I have your location that is being transmitted from your IP address from your computer. I have access to how much time you have spent on that website. I have access to what you viewed on that website and advertisement data on what you looked at the longest and such. And so this little exercise here shows that many people really don't understand or bother to check what they accept. So for a bit of an intro, what are cookies? Sadly, not a nice little treat. In their most simple form, it is a text file that is stored in your computer that tracks various things. Today, I will be focusing on a few main types. The first one being the first-party cookie. These are your safe ones. These are the cookies that are integral to a website's function, and they do basic website things such as maintaining a secure connection, or being the thing that lets you remember your login whenever you log in and click that checkbox. There are third-party cookies, which are our dangerous ones. Those are the ones that will track you across everything that you do while you are logged into your browser. They are widely gathered by advertising agencies and are ways on how advertisers gather your data without you really knowing all at what they're getting at. And then just a few basic understandings for some of the other types of cookies. Authentication lies a lot with the first-party cookies, and tracking cookies are things that get like your IP, your location, what websites you visited, and how long you were there and such. So, the invention of the cookie. For better context, the World Wide Web went public in 1993, and the cookie was invented by, I'm really bad at this pronunciation, Luau Montuli in 1994. So cookies have been alongside the internet for basically as long as it's been around. And the way that they were originally thought up was there was the Gopher file system, and it had a problem where it could store certain data that was used on the internet by various website users, but it couldn't really organize itself. And so what Montuli wanted to do was have a way to sort it. Essentially, like you had a library, but none of the books had a spine on them. And he wanted to make a system to add that spine into the computer storage. And that is what he did with the cookie. And actually, he knew that in the future this could be used in ways to track data and be just monetized in general, which he tried to avoid, but sadly, companies always find a way to get their money. So, quick show of hands. How many of y'all have gone to a website and clicked that allow all right there? Okay. How many of you have actually bothered to read what it does, or maybe check out this little there's a customize section right there? Okay, so we got a few people in here that actually do bother to check it. And has anyone ever avoided a website because of what their cookies have said? Okay, 3, 4, okay. That's honestly more than I thought. Kind of ruins my point here because all of y'all are so attentive and a great audience. But Yes, a large majority of people, much like a terms and conditions, don't read what this does. They don't understand what it means, and oftentimes it catches people in certain things. And so just some pros and cons on this. I know I've been talking a little negative, but cookies aren't all that bad. They were a major part for the backing of Adobe Flash for playing games on the internet, and was a massive function for how they ran. Or if you ever had that one computer lab, back in public schools where you would play a game on it and then you could boot up your save file again. Your save file was saved on that browser's cookies. And it also does things like remaining your logins. So that way you don't have to constantly log into a website every single time you use it, and you can just boot up your Amazon account and not have to do things like two-factor and everything, because it remembers who you are. And because it remembers who you are, it makes the internet a little bit more personable. Gives you a bit of flair in there, Your advertisements, they're a bit more connected to who you are. Your search results are a bit more related to what you actually want to do, what you're actually looking for. Sites like Target and Netflix and YouTube are able to use the data from your cookies to give you recommendations on what the next thing you should watch is, which is always great, because sometimes you find the next magic product that you didn't know you needed, or you find the next great show or movie. But all of this tracking and convenience always comes with a downside. One of the biggest problems is that your data is being used for profit. That's scary. Nobody likes having information about them, parts of their life, just being sold for someone else's gain. And a lot of this gets very, very hidden from the user. Like I said, not many people read those cookies settings and customize their cookies to make sure that they're only doing the necessary stuff. Everyone in here seems fairly attentive on that, so I guess we're learning something here with computer science. But there is an interesting little story I want to tell about the unintended consequences about making the internet more personable. So, this was a story that I heard last semester in my data ethics class. And what ended up occurring was there was a teenage girl that was shopping at Target online and in the store using her family's Target Red Card. And one of the things that the Target Red Card does is that it tracks what you purchase at whatever Target you're at. And they do that so that way, they can give you some like coupons and whatnot for other purchases to try to get you to keep shopping at Target. So what ended up happening was this teenage woman was buying some, just random stuff, maybe some funky foods and whatnot. And then one day, her parents started getting emails and physical coupons in the mail for things like baby diapers and baby formulas and baby toys and baby clothes. And little did they find out that even before their daughter knew that she was pregnant, Target had figured out from her purchases that she was most likely pregnant and would be purchasing these items in the next 3 to 4 months. And what do you know? It was correct. It was able to deduce from the purchase information, even before the user did, that she had a teenage pregnancy. And so, as we've heard, they do many, many different things. This is just the list that I was able to gather from Google's own policy site on advertising and cookies. And a funny little thing about this is you go to how they use it, and they're like, oh yeah, it's used to memorize what you do for your logins and personalize and blah, 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 blah. And it's used to maintain the utmost security. But the moment you get to that advertising section, they start to get a little vague with how they do their wording, which is always a bit concerning when you're trying to get information on such. For example, I had to do a separate search to realize that cookies can in fact track how long you spend on a website and looking at what elements of that website, which is something Google didn't tell me, even though they have a whole website dedicated to telling you this stuff. But you hear all this, and why should I care? Maybe I don't mind having my information sold. Maybe I like the personality that the internet gives me. Maybe I enjoy not having to log in all the time. I have found some great recommendations on YouTube. And all of that is fair. But let's give ourselves a bit of context here for the current situation of cookies. This is a video from the Washington Post about what cookies would be like if you were shopping in person.
Chrome lets web trackers follow you around in a way that might freak you out in the real world. Imagine you're just out browsing, minding your own business. But from the very first place you visit, you get joined by one of these. A cookie. He belongs to an advertising network or data tracker. In other words, he's a spy. What's pesky about cookies is they stick with you, allowing nosy companies to tag along to all the other places you browse. The more places you go, the more cookies you collect. They're how a pair of pants you look at in one shop end up following you around everywhere you go. Tracker cookies come from lots of companies you've probably never heard of. But the #1 cookie baker is Google, the same company that makes the #1 web browser, Chrome.
Can I get your coffee?
Google makes most of its money by targeting ads. So no wonder Google doesn't do much to stop the surveillance. You never know where you'll find a cookie. Over time, cookies help data companies build profiles of your interests, income, favorite places, and personality. These profiles can shape what you see online, including the prices you get charged for products. In a week of regular web browsing, you might get tagged by more than 10,000 third-party cookies. But it doesn't have to be this way. You can use a browser that blocks third-party cookies by default, like Mozilla Firefox or Apple Safari. Chrome keeps making it harder and harder to block trackers because Google has a conflict of interest. Switching is the easiest way to protect your privacy. Unless you really like surfing the web with a whole bunch of nosy strangers.
So yeah, that gives us a bit of context on just how cookies get used. And oh my God, why will this not exit? There we go. Gives us a bit of context on how cookies get used and what it's really like. As was mentioned in the video, you can get targeted by, I believe it was about 10,000 advertising cookies in a week. Does anyone have any guess on how long Chrome stores those cookies? Anyone want to give a number? It's not indefinitely. There is a timer on them.
1 week.
It's not 1 week.
6 months.
Not 6 months. The answer is 13 months. Over a year, these cookies are kept stored locally on your computer and track everything that you do for those 13 months. And the clicker's not working. All right. So, some reasons about why you should care, even if you don't already. Again, I've gone on and on about it's invasive, it's selling for profit. We already had a presentation in here about the dangers of surveillance capitalism and the current state of technology. But there's one part that I had recently discovered from one of my classes. And it's the matter of just plain human dignity and pride. This is your information. This is about you. People care about that. You know, if you've ever been at home, you like locking the door to your room. Or maybe you get annoyed that your parents would never let you lock your door. Every human has a sense of privacy built within them that we all like. The whole world doesn't need to know exactly what we're doing and what is going on at every single moment. But sadly, in the era that we live in, that is almost impossible. There is a world where everything that we do is tracked, everything is viewed. We have a profile that we don't know about that is just constantly observed, constantly used, and the types of things that they know are a lot more than you think. And that is just plain creepy to me. And so, what are some of the solutions? Currently, the two biggest ones have been the European Data Protection Supervision and the General Data Protection Regulation. Both of these are pieces of EU legislation that have limited the scope of companies and what they can do. One of the big ones has been actually requiring those pop-ups for, do you want to allow all cookies? That's why maybe 5 to 8 years ago, you didn't see those before. It's because the EU made it a law that the user had to opt into these kinds of cookies when they visited their site. But this does kind of highlight an interesting thing. There is no current federal legislation against the use of cookies or even just general user data at all that's gathered on the internet. And most of our protections come from the EU. This is an interesting quirk about the international world that we live in today. So a company, they might be able to get more profits by specializing their site between each different region. So the legislations in the EU only have to be obeyed in the EU. So in the United States, they could just not require the cookie opt-in. But the problem with that is that requires development time. That requires a new functionality where they have to implement a location tracking of where your IP is coming from and such. And that time and effort and the extra money to develop it often isn't worth it. Which means when one country makes a big legislation decision like the EU has, companies just obey it and follow it to every single country, which is fun, but sadly, I don't think it's much of an excuse for the frankly lackluster job the American government has done at defending the internet rights of their users and their citizens. We aren't completely out of it. The California Consumer Protections Act is one of the few pieces of widespread American legislation that does defend us against some very invasive practices, but it is only within the state of California, and sadly, because it's only one state, companies typically take that extra development time to get around it when you're not from California. And there have obviously been some personal private lawsuits involving civil rights of surveillance and whatnot, but that's always iffy. Some of them work, some of them get appealed because, again, legislation's very loose on this. So the biggest thing that you can do is take this problem into your own hands. Like was said in the video, there are web browsers out there that limit or flat out block cookies, like Firefox and like Safari. And the great things about those two web browsers is they are not based on a piece of technology called Chromium, which is the framework that Chrome and a bunch of other browsers, such as the Brave browser, operate under, which is a problem because Brave, for example, is a browser that advertises security, but that security gets kind of skirted because it's Chromium-based, so Google still has access to certain things. There are extensions such as uBlock Origin that not only act as an ad blocker, but a tracking blocker as well for extra layers of security. You can go into your web browser itself, and there's probably a section on privacy and security in those settings. And you can clear your cache and clear your cookies, and that will help get them out of there without having to wait for 13 months. If you really want to take that extra step, there's always things like petitions and individual bills that you can support, or you can message people, such as calling local mayors and senators that you are concerned about this as a citizen, and it is your right to tell your representatives what you have problems with and what you need to see fixed. Yeah, thank you. And one big thing to remember, beware of that cookie monster.